So did you guys get to read everything?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was a lot.
Okay, good. Or watch the videos too. There was just a lot. I like videos better. Okay, so can you guys explain one each of the three diversity paradigms described in Making Differences Matter? If just one person does one each, we'll cover them all.
I'm getting really bad. I don't know.
Okay, so there's three paradigms. And if each of you guys could just go over one of them, so there's a simulation, differentiation, integration, and describe it.
Hey, Kaylee, would you try and mute your microphone?
Is that
I was getting a bad echo. I don't know if anybody else was, so I didn't quite hear what you were saying, Madison.
Oh, okay, I'll say it one more time. So there's three diversity paradigms, I think that's how you say it, in Making Differences Matter. Can each of you just explain one of them so we can cover all of them?
I'll do the simulation. I'm just looking at the PowerPoint right now, and it says, in parentheses, discrimination and fairness. And the way they look at it is we're all the same. They don't acknowledge any differences, whether you're female or male, what color you are, what your race is, anything. They just ignore it and act like everything's the same.
And then on differentiation, access, and legitimacy, they celebrate the differences, but they almost go too far in the other direction of assimilation, where they kind of pigeonhole. If you happen to be Hispanic or Black or female, they pigeonhole you into that demographic, and they don't really look at other things that you can bring to the team. And the people that are kind of in that situation kind of feel like they've been pigeonholed and aren't being used for anything other than what their race or gender can bring to that team.
Can you guys hear me? Okay, so the integration was the other one, and so I don't know, maybe I didn't understand it, but I thought of like having integrity as far as it goes, so like being willing to stand up when there are things that aren't correct, or they're having integrity to accept everyone for who they are and to work together.
Yes, and trying to think. The only job I've really had is I worked at a call center, but then I got promoted to a different area in the company. And with it, they really worked on, one of my advisors, he really worked on having everybody work together with all of their differences. And I really liked how he did it, because he had us take a personality quiz, and he was like, okay, since this is your personality, that's how our personality types can work together, and how you can really help the team on everything. Melody Hobson says colorblindness is dangerous. Do you guys agree? Do you not agree? What are your thoughts on that?
Color blindness was kind of like a hard one for me, because I feel like I have a hard time acknowledging it. I guess I'm kind of more of the we're all the same. because I feel like that if I really, I guess I'm scared that I'm going to offend someone who's different than me by acknowledging their differences. So I don't know. I liked her talk, and I like that people acknowledge the differences because it definitely helps businesses or whatever. But yeah, like for me on a personal level, it's hard.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I think it takes, like she called it, being brave, but I think it's going to really be effective in a certain situation that you're in. If you're in a business situation and people are there to learn and to grow and contribute, then being color brave is a little bit more maybe going to work better than just a random person on the street. But I think there's of course a lot of work to do in these areas. But I thought it was a good talk as well.
Kind of what stood out to me was kind of how she talked about confronting issues of race and diversity. So it's like we're going to be in those situations and we need to be brave and to stand up.
Okay, and I didn't catch where you guys are from. I don't, because I feel like it kind of makes a difference with the whole diversity thing sometimes. Are any of you guys from the South or somewhat South? I consider Oklahoma the South, and that's where I'm from.
I grew up in Maine.
So my husband's from Florida, so super south, and there is definitely like a huge difference between like his view on this topic and my view. There's a huge difference.
Yeah. It's funny because the first time I really noticed that there was a segregation, and I'm only 22 years old, so, and you would think it's kind of all gone, but whenever I went, I went to Vegas for my 16th birthday to just lay out at the pools, and I just noticed how they weren't treated differently, and I thought that was really weird how they were just intermixed with everything, just because there's not in Oklahoma, even though they're trying to get rid of segregation completely, and it's been quite a few decades now. There's still all black towns, and there's still majority, and it's in the city as well. And that's just because people just don't intermix and intermove. So I think it was interesting that we went over this and how she talked about it. Do you guys think that colorblindness is the same as discrimination and fairness assimilation paradigm?
I think so, because you're pretty much trying to ignore any kind of difference because you don't want to, for whatever reason, whether you don't want to offend or whatever. But the whole point of this lesson was that everybody's different points of view, different perspectives, different life experiences. I will never understand what it is like to be a black male, living in America. So I couldn't pretend to be the same. And he's not going to be able to relate to my experience. But when you get together and can communicate your shared experiences, then you can grow from that. And so I think color blindness is pretty much going to be this fall into assimilation if I'm thinking of that right.
Something that stood out to me was, I think it was in the reading, I don't remember for sure, but it was like the Chinese lady, I think that she was I want to say a chemist, I don't remember for sure, but like she used things that she learned about Chinese cooking to help solve her problems. But, and she was scared to like say that's why, or how she solved it is because she was scared to think about it.
I think you're muted. I couldn't hear you.
I'm so not used to being muted. Sorry. Thank you. Why do authors of Making Differences Matter believe the integration, learning, and effectiveness paradigm is the best approach to diversity in the workplace? And do you guys agree with that? Yes or no, and why?
I agree with that. I think if you've ever served on a ward council and a ward, there's so much more work that gets done effectively if you listen to everybody's opinions, because you'll have people that were converts and people that have been always lifetime members and different races in there. And if you open it up to a discussion about how you can all best work together, it works a lot better than if you just assume that you're all coming from the same page. You just get all these different ideas thrown out that can benefit the whole group as opposed to just having one view. And I think that's the danger of being assimilated or even trying to pigeonhole people like, oh, you're a convert, so you only need to work with converts. Like that kind of thing is not helpful, as opposed to opening up and trying to take everyone's life experiences and use that to grow and to learn in a company, in a family, in a church calling, whatever it might be. The integration is going to be much more effective, I think.
I like how you applied that into like a church sense, because that makes it, I don't know what I was going to say, but it really makes sense. Like, you can't put a convert just teaching converts. And another thing I was thinking is, like, in a group or a business or whatever, we all have different experiences. And I mean, even two people that live in the same area but are different race have different backgrounds and different points of view, which helps with different problems or things that they're trying to accomplish.
I personally think for this one that each group or business or party, or I'm trying to think, yeah, each team needs to work on it in a way that works for them. And there's not really one way that's going to be best, and everybody's going to take it differently. There's not really a way that you can label it. That's my thinking to it. Okay, what does Hobson mean about being color brave? What do you guys think color braveness would look like in the workplace? Is it similar to the integration paradigm, or is she talking about something different?
I think that, like she said, that talking about color or race can be very confrontational, and people kind of steer away from it because they're worried about offending or worried about coming off as racist or whatever it might be. But so that you have to be brave to have those proactive conversations about race for it to ever change. And I think it can be done in a way that won't offend, but I think it's very tricky and very hard, and that's why people kind of avoid it. It's like the elephant in the room, that it's there, but you want to pretend that it's not. And so I think this is why it's so difficult to have this integration, because it's like people walk on eggshells, and until we kind of change that mindset, it's going to be hard to be color brave as opposed to colorblind, I think.
Kind of what I thought about being color brave is like diversity is like a good thing. In the readings, it talked about a lot of examples of like the good things about diversity. So I think being color brave is like standing up to like not judging people because of their race, and being willing to accept others' points of view that are different than yours.
One thing that I really liked what she said was in her talk, she was like, I have been treated good way more times than I've been treated bad. And I like how like bold she is about not being afraid to like acknowledge people's differences. And she looks at it as a positive thing, not a negative thing. So if it is a positive thing, then we really do need to embrace it, and it shouldn't be hard, but even though sometimes it can be.
I think the way that she was raised really makes a difference in it all too, because her mom was like, you're not always going to be treated well, but it also is how you treat them. So expect it, but don't always look for the worst in the situation. It's funny because my mom right now my parents are going through a divorce, and everything that my dad says to her, she picks apart, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, I cannot believe that he just said that." I'm like, "Mom, I really don't think he's meaning to be rude. I think he's just saying something." So it's also how you perceive what people say to you as well. The authors of Making Differences Matter explain that some managers are more comfortable with addressing problems with outright discrimination than more subtle diversity problems. That's on page 6. And have you guys ever been in a team, group, or organization where one person's ideas or approach to doing work was hard for the rest of the group to understand because of the background, their experiences, gender, race, or something else?
So I have a good example of this. I actually have another group this morning, and there's a cute lady from London, and she's originally from Brazil. And she kind of has a hard time speaking English. Like, she's pretty good, but she still has an accent, and it's hard for me to understand her sometimes. So I often ask her to repeat stuff.
Something that I kind of came to my mind is I work in the agriculture industry, so there's a lot of H-2A workers that come over from Mexico to the States, and they'll work for about 9 months during like the production agriculture season, and they'll head back. And I've worked with a lot of people that it's like hard for them to work together because differences, maybe pride, and I mean I've worked with people that have looked down upon them, which isn't right. But it's interesting because the more I've worked with them, the more I guess they have like a different view on things. And so like I've honestly learned a ton from working side by side with each of the H-2A workers. I think just because of the way they were raised and the different ways that they see things, they have a lot of different views towards how they can get the job
Um, so Mark, in that situation, did you gain anything from the diversity of the group? Or Kaylee, did you?
I would say so. It was kind of interesting because the last place I worked for, a good friend of mine worked out there too, and there's like 4 H-2A workers that worked there as well, and you just couldn't work with him. It was interesting to see like the personality. I guess it's more so his personality of not being willing to work with other people or maybe looking down upon them, and so he eventually just ended up quitting. And it was kind of like a lot of drama and stuff going on. But then once he quit, the more I worked with them, honestly, the more I learned. Like they had been there and worked. It was for a hay farm, so they had been there a lot longer than both of us, and so the things that they were able to teach me was really valuable. And this other guy, he didn't see that they would have any value.
Okay, many companies still do have problems with outright discrimination. Have you guys ever worked for a company or observed a company where there were outright discrimination problems? And what was that experience like if you have?
I've worked at a couple of different companies that have had a lot of like Hispanic workers, and I've never seen a management problem. Like the management always seems fine with the diversification, but then within an employer, like the employees, sometimes they don't always get along well, which is kind of sad because I feel like there's a lot they can learn from each other.
My dad actually works in the construction business. My husband does as well. And they work with Latinos all the time. I can't say just Mexicans because there's people from all over the place. And my dad has really, it's been interesting to see him over the years work with them just because he kind of speaks Spanglish and he doesn't always understand them all the time. So he has to hire other people for the language barrier. I mean, he's definitely worked on it. but just how he's handled it has really helped me approach and be around the Latinos better. Because it's still sometimes weird for me, definitely. And then my grandmother actually was raised in Louisiana, and she had Black help in the home when she was being raised. And I can tell that she's really worked on with her kids and with her grandkids that everybody has worth and everybody should be treated the same, and no one should be treated differently just because of their outright looks. And then do you guys know who John Skipper is, the ESPN president? Anyways, what do you guys think he meant when he answered yes to the question, do we hire the minority of the person who is qualified? Or do we hire the minority or the person who is most qualified? Do you believe this is the right approach to hiring for diversity?
I think he was saying that they could be the same person. The minority could be the most qualified, and just when he kind of separated it like that, you're saying, oh, I have to either choose the most qualified person or the minority. And he's saying they could be the same person, and oftentimes are. And I think that sometimes we have the mindset, oh, affirmative action, I have to hire, so many different nationalities, different races, different, genders. And so maybe I'm not getting the best person, but oftentimes they will be the best person, but you have to change your mindset about that. I think that's what he was trying to say on that.
That's what I took from when he said that.
I think it's interesting coaching sports because there's a lot of diversity. I think kind of like sports and kind of things like that kind of brought people together, I guess you could say. But it's just interesting to see how they kind of capitalize on that with their diversification, because it seems like you always see like 2 or 3 different races that are all, I guess, broadcasting or doing the talk show together.
I think it's interesting as well that he doesn't just have men there for the sports, especially football, how there's Erin Andrews, who I love, but there's a lot of women reporters too working for them now. Okay, in Elder Ballard's talk, he describes the church council. Does the ward council he described follow the integration paradigm?
I think it does. He doesn't necessarily say that they have different races or whatever, but we know that they have different genders. He brought in, I guess the ward council consists of sister and brother, and they all work in different groups. They brought the primary workers, the Relief Society, the Elders Quorum, all these different groups, which really I guess makes them different because of the different people they work with, and each of their needs are different depending on their group.
Yeah, my husband is a bishop right now, and so he deals with this all the time, and he's always amazed that when he has a problem and he can't figure it out, when he opens it up to the ward council, and they always come up with solutions that invite the Spirit and help him solve whatever it might be for the ward. And I think, he has a very limited perspective of his life and what he's had. And so when he tries to just do it by himself, he has this very narrow view. But when you expose it to the whole group, then you're going to have a diverse experience, and then your view is a lot broader. And so I think the ward council can really be an effective tool in a church if it is used with its integration aspect as better than like the bishop saying, okay, this is what I'm thinking. You all need to agree with me and assimilate yourselves to my way of thinking. That's not going to be an effective way to lead and to solve problems, I don't think.
What are the primary advantages to a bishop of counseling with the Elders Quorum president, Relief Society president, primary president, and others?
I think they all kind of have like different, roles in the gospel, but also if you look outside the gospel, they all have different jobs. Some might be mothers and things like that. So I think that as they all kind of come together, they can better, I guess, come up with ideas or better know how to help those people. Because I think it'd be kind of hard kind of looking at, say, my father that he works a lot and is out of the home. It might be hard for him to relate to maybe like a single mother or something like that about raising children. And so I think that when you include like primary and least study, things like that, everyone can kind of help to better determine what to do.
So kind of like Mark said, I think they all have different point of views. So if you have a problem or a situation that the bishop doesn't know how to address, they can look at it from all these different point of views and find the best way to tackle that problem.
And I think this works if the leadership, like the business, like a bishop or a company boss, is like open to suggestions and maybe humble themselves to know that they don't know it all. And I like how the one example was the loudest person that she had to tell was causing the problem about reverence was the bishop himself. And so she was able to suggest that, and the bishop was able to take that and like, oh, he wasn't realizing he was a problem. And I think if you have your leadership set up in a way that people can approach you and tell you things they've witnessed or that they see could maybe benefit or help out, and that you're able to be humble enough to take that suggestions and not be offended or confrontational about it. And I think that really opens your company or your ward to communication, and people aren't afraid to speak out when it's that environment, I think.
The next question is, how could a bishop use the diversity of his council to help the ward? I feel like we've kind of answered that question just because everyone else has a different response. Have you guys ever seen bishops or other church leaders do this?
I've worked with several bishops, and there are some that are really good at utilizing the ward council and are very successful. And in those wards where I've served, the ward has actually been able to reach out to less actives, find ways to solve problems in the ward much more effective than a bishop. I had a bishop that was very kind of dictatorish, and the ward council was basically his own personal platform. And so he would just talk the whole time and kind of issue assignments and never got feedback. And he did a lot himself too. So he was burned out and actually, asked to be released a couple years in because he couldn't do it all, but he tried to do it all, and you can't do it that way. You have to actually involve everybody and get everybody's feedback and allow them to serve in the way they feel inspired to, or you will burn out on it. And people don't respond too well when they're just kind of told what to do and they don't feel like they're invested in it because they haven't actually given you their opinions.
So my dad's the second counselor in his ward right now. So he's not a bishop, but once in a while he'll come home and talk to my mom about things that are appropriate to talk about that they've discussed in ward council or whatever. And she even will mention like stuff like, oh, you can do this, just different ideas to help with what they were discussing. And even like that, I guess, is another view on something that really helps their bishopric.
Gailey, going off that, I've had one of my old bishops, he always mentioned how much his wife has helped him, even though she didn't have a calling at the time that he was a bishop, because, and it's how vital like the wife's role is in helping a bishop and being there supporting him to get everything done, and how we shouldn't feel belittled because we were a woman. And I really have always thought of that whenever people are like, well, guys can do this and girls can't. I'm like, yeah, we can. I'm like, can't even say anything like that. Okay. The Making Differences Matter article assumes that there's some value to companies in promoting a diverse workforce. Do you guys agree? What are the advantages? Are there disadvantages?
I agree. I think that one of the examples, if I'm thinking of the right article, it talked about like sales and how the company thought like this way was the best way to make sales. I think it was just like cold calls, but then other people were doing like making sales through relationships and having success. So it's like, I think the more maybe diversified your sales team is, like people might specialize in different things, the more success you have as a whole.
And I also think they mentioned a law firm that brought in an African American female, and she had a totally different way to connect with women and to bring cases in that they kind of had ignored because they didn't see the value of them, because they really didn't have the life experience of single moms or people living in underprivileged neighborhoods or whatever. So they were just kind of ignoring some cases they could take and help out with, but she opened their eyes a lot more. So I think that's when you have that integration that works really well for a company, when you actually do allow your diversity to work for you and not just, they said, like, be the window dressing. It doesn't need to be that. They can actually offer a lot of insight and life experience that will benefit your business and cause it to grow. And that law firm did. It grew from those cases. So I think that was a good example of how it can work.
What approach would you guys take to diversity as a manager, if you guys were a manager?
I really hope after reading all this, I would do the integration, but I think like all these companies are trying to do it. It's like trial and error, and it takes a lot of patience to get people's mindsets to change, because I think oftentimes in companies it's just kind of easier to do what you've been doing. And it's basically the being fair and not discriminating, which means we're all the same. Nobody make waves, nobody point out difference. And I think that's kind of the culture we've been raised in. So I think, and they were saying the US Army is kind of the big company that kind of follows along that line. And I think it's going to be hard to change that mindset, but to see the advantages that can come out of that, I think it's worth putting the effort into it and trying to do the integration and have that be a positive experience. But knowing that it'll take time and it will take a lot of effort to kind of change that, I think.
One thing I think for diversity is you have to be open, or not diversity, but dealing with it and integrating a way where everyone feels equal, is you really have to be able to receive constructive criticism. Anytime anybody has an opinion about anything, don't take it as they're attacking me. You have to take it more as, okay, they're trying to help me. They're trying to help me be a better person. They're trying to help me be better in this role that I'm doing right now. And you also have to be approachable and let people know, like, hey, come talk to me. Let's figure this out. And if they do offend you, tell them, hey, I'm kind of offended by this, just so you can get it sorted out and not feel so attacked.
Yeah, I think that comes back to where they were saying there needs to be communication, and it needs to be an environment where communication is welcomed and difference of opinions. I think the apostles talk about this all the time, that they go in there, they are brilliant men from different careers, and they all have their own ideas, and they come together and they're able to discuss, argue, and get their points out, and then they all come together with a solution. But they're allowed to be heard, and their opinions are never like, oh, that's ridiculous or whatever. They're allowed to bring what their experiences have allowed them to bring, and then they have a big discussion. And I think if we can foster that same kind of communication and that kind of safe place to have your thoughts be heard, then it'll be helpful to that being successful.
Kaylee and Mark, do you guys have any?
Yeah, I'm thinking about this. I'm like, I don't know what I would do to make sure that it was diversified. I think it went back to the one manager who told the person that was hiring people to make sure that there was diversity being hired. And he asked, should I hire the minority or the most qualified? And he said yes. So I think that would be the first step to making sure that there was diversity within a company, is making sure that people are hired, I guess, for the right reason. And then I liked what you guys touched on, making sure that everyone feels comfortable in the workplace, that if you do hire somebody who is different from the people who are currently working in the company, because it would take time and to get it diversified, to make sure that they don't feel like the odd one out, that they are comfortable working there.
Mark, do you have anything that you do as a manager? Or kind of what we've all said?
I'm just kind of going along with what you guys said, and then I guess just kind of, and I feel like the gospel gives us good principles about treating others equally and things like that. So just kind of, I don't know, just kind of keep that in your mind as well.
Thank you. Okay, so that is everything for what we've read. Do you guys want to go over the doohickey stuff? And then, Mark, let's first figure out when do you want all of our information? Do you want it Saturday? Do you want it Friday? That's totally up to you.
Do you know when it's due for sure? Is it Monday morning? I can look real quick.
End of week 5, so probably Monday morning, I think.
So
Would Friday night be all right with you guys? By Friday night?
yeah, that works for me.
So which problem do you girls want to tackle? We have performance appraisals, working in teams, and then diversity.
I'll do diversity.
Okay.
I'll do working in teams.
Okay. Then I'll do the appraisal part. And that will leave Mark to do the compiling all our data in this 8-page paper, doing the intro and the conclusion. And then we need to come up with which one of those problems we think is the most critical once you read the doohickeys. So if you girls want to look, and Mark too, if you want to read through that again and see which of all the problems in the company that fall under these 3 categories, which one you think is the most critical and that needs to be addressed first, maybe we can come up with what we think that would be. In addition to our papers. Does that make sense?
The main issues I thought were like the diversification, because like 90% of the managers were white, middle-aged class. So it's kind of like, and then the factory workers, there's a lot more diversity. So it wasn't really, I guess, represented with their management. The diversification was in the factory. And then maybe like performance reviews is another thing, because it's like everything seems so disorganized. I feel like they were to meet with people, maybe they could kind of get things moving and get people working together.
Yeah, it seemed to be a very disorganized, and they were losing business because of that. Like they were missing out on this big deal coming up. So I think probably whichever thing would solve that problem the first, would be one of the crucial things, is be able to get that big order that was coming in. I don't know if that'd be what to address first, but I would think that would be the most important thing because they're going to lose a huge order if they don't pull something together. So, so I guess if you guys read it again, and then we all can just do a group email and say, well, I think this is the most important issue to be addressed, because that's paragraph. That's like a big part of it too, is the most important thing to focus on. So if we all kind of come up with our own solution and we pick one, and then we can kind of add our insights to that, and then Mark can kind of put all that together as well.
I kind of feel like trying to see here. So for this, are the issues that we're supposed to be talking about, or the problem, are we just supposed to find one big problem? Or are we supposed to use what we've learned in the class, like finding problems and dealing with diversity, finding problems dealing with the teamwork, and I forgot the other one already. We're supposed to do that.
Yeah, I think you read back through it and you find the main problem that would deal with performance, and then you come up with 4 solutions that they could do to address that one problem. And then the most critical problem, there's just one that's most critical.
Oh, okay.
In light of all the problems and solutions you identified, explain what is the most important thing to focus on, and describe why you think this is the key issue. Describe pros, cons, obstacles, etc. And so that portion has to be like deep reflection, application of content. That's kind of a big part of the paper, is that number 4 part, where we just say, okay, these are our problems, these are our solutions, and we think this problem is the main problem for this company right now at this point. And then we kind of discuss why, and
Okay.
pull in our readings and stuff, and then we have to submit that as well.
So that makes sense.
So I think if we all read it separately this week, and we do a group email, say, this is kind of what I'm thinking, this is probably the biggest problem they have right now. And then if we all agree on that, then we can kind of focus on writing that number 4 paragraph, and then submitting that in addition to the one that we come up with our problems and solutions. And I guess just make sure that whatever you pull out, you have the citations there for Mark to use, because he has to use, do a bibliography as well.
Sounds good.
All right. Is that everything then?
Yeah,
I think
that's
so.
everything.
All right. Thanks, guys. We'll see you
You
next.
are welcome. See you next week.
Thanks, Madison.
Welcome. Bye.
Bye.